Hello everyone, it's Stephen Whiteside here from theuptrend.com with this weekend's edition of Stock Market Timing Television. Well, it was another busy week. There was a lot of noise. It wasn't as volatile as the previous week, but we did get over the Fed meeting and employment numbers, plus some news out of China and quite a few earnings reports. Now, this weekend's presentation is going to be a little different. We are going to start off with some weekly charts, but then quickly head into the daily charts featuring the Flypaper channel to have a specific look at the market. Now, starting off with a weekly chart of the TSX 60, we're still stuck trying to break over resistance at 1187.50. We're unable to do that. We did trade above it, but then we ended the week just slightly lower. Then looking at the Dow, which the whole world is watching as it has been leading the markets higher. The Dow 30 still stuck at resistance here, closing lower on the week by 1.4%. And as you can see, this week was less volatile than the previous week, where we had a huge move up, and then we've kind of stalled here. And I think that might be as high as we can go for now. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, the VIX is still very bullish, and while the stock market was down on the week, so is the VIX. So the fear index dropped by 4.66% on the week. If you're watching the market during the week, on Monday, we're going to remain short-term bullish on the market as long as the VIX does not close above 2801. And of course, if that doesn't happen on Monday, that upper channel line is going to continue to move lower daily. Now, the VIX index is doing a good job tracking the Dow, but not the rest of the market right now, and that is quite a concern for me. I think what's happening is I think options traders are looking at the seasonality chart, and they're just saying, hey, we put in a low in October, so it's up and away from here to year end. And it's never a straight line. The tendency is to move higher off the October lows into year end. There are an enormous amount of numbers to come out between now and year end. A lot of people, of course, wait and see how the Black Friday sales results are. Then there's a tax loss selling in December that can often be a major, have major downward pressure on the market. So there's lots of things can happen between here and year end. But what makes this year very different is we've got historically high inflation and we've got central banks aggressively raising interest rates. So this year is not the same as every other year. And I think the Dow has got ahead of itself. If we look at the daily Flypaper channel charts, you can see the Dow has started to break out above the Flypaper channel. That is certainly bullish. It has started to break out above the September high. That is very bullish. Once we start breaking out above the September high, you go to the next high, and that's the August high, which is way up here. This is a total anomaly because that's not what the rest of the market's doing. Look at the S&P 500. Yes, we traded into the Flypaper channel, but now we're back below it. And we've got nowhere near the September high. Look at the NASDAQ. It didn't even get into the Flypaper channel, and now we're trading back down below the recent low. So if options traders believe we've put an October low and that's it, well, they're like a day away from retesting that low. So I think options traders are getting way ahead of themselves. Then you've got the Russell 2000. So we're looking at the mid caps. They've been in the channel for a while now, not going anywhere. Same with the micro caps. And then when we break down the S&P 500 subsectors, what's working? Well, energy, of course, is working, but it doesn't make up that much of the U.S. stock market. And we'll take a look at that a little more in a minute or two. But here we are trading back up at the highs we saw a few months ago and getting well ahead of the commodities. So that's one of the major players in the S&P 500. And then we're looking at the financials. They started to trade above the Flypaper channel, but have not broken out above the September high. Then we're looking at healthcare. Healthcare has traded above the Flypaper channel. It has traded above the September high and is currently, as of Wednesday, it traded up to the August high before pulling back on Thursday and Friday. Then looking at industrials have traded up to the September high and stopped. And then the list of what's not working is a lot bigger than what's working. So we start off with communication services making a new low on Friday. So yeah, not an October low, that's a November low. And then we're looking at consumer discretionary. They're a day away from retesting the October low. Then consumer staples, which of course, should do well during a recession, and they are outperforming consumer discretionary stocks at the moment, but they have not taken out the September high. Similar situation for materials, and then we're looking at real estate. And of course, higher interest rates is not good for the real estate sector. Then we're looking at technology, which of course looks pretty similar to the NASDAQ. Then we're looking at utilities, and utilities have traded up to the bottom of the flypaper channel and then pulled back nowhere near the September high for the utility sector. Just a couple of other ones. The Dow Transports, of course, go along with the Dow 30, and you can see that we're in the flypaper channel at the moment. We have not taken out the September high. And then one sector, one index that I like to follow is the SOX index. Again, we haven't even got into the flypaper channel, so this bounce off the October low hasn't been strong enough to even get us to the flypaper channel, and certainly nowhere near the September highs. Then looking at travel, you might have seen some of the cruise lines had big up days this week, but if you look at the travel ETF, you can see we're still well below the flypaper channel. So anything trading below the flypaper channel is in a bear market, and what typically happens is if we can trade up to that channel, people will sell the rip. In a bull market, the flypaper channel will act as support, and typically people will start to buy once we've got down into the flypaper channel and started to reverse. So you're looking at a lot of sectors in the market still in bear markets on a short-term basis. And there's one of the ARK ETFs. There's the Innovation ETF, and it is less than 1 day away from breaking down through the October lows, so nothing going on there. And then looking at China for a second, China got a bounce on Friday with rumors that they're going to change their COVID policies. It looks like that was a false rumor, so look for the Chinese market to reverse on Monday, but you can see the Chinese market's nowhere near the flypaper channel and certainly nowhere near the September highs. Okay, looking at the Canadian market, we obviously don't have the Dow helping us north of the border here, but looking at the TSX, you can see we have traded into the flypaper channel up to the top, similar to the TSX 60. Again, not breaking out above those September highs. There's the mid caps, small caps looking a little weaker, and then the micro caps looking very weak at the moment, but not trending lower at the present time. So that's not a very bullish picture. Yes, there's been some short-term trades, and certainly the energy sector has been a great place to be, just like in the U.S. The energy sector is much more important to the Canadian market than the U.S. market. On Friday, 6 of the top 10 most actively traded stocks on the TSX were energy stocks. Only one of the top 10 stocks in the U.S. was an energy stock, and it wasn't even an American stock. It was a Brazilian company. So there is one energy stock in the Dow 30, but that's it. So these energy stocks are much more important to the Canadian market than the U.S. market. There's consumer discretionary trading. It's traded above the top of the flypaper channel, but has not broken out above the September high. Similar situation for the industrials. They've started to trade above the top of the flypaper channel. Then we've got consumer staples, which is traded up to the top of the flypaper channel, but hasn't broken out above. And in all three cases here, we're talking about sectors of the market that have not been able to trade above their September highs. Then we can look at base metals, and some people are getting excited because it looks like base metals might be getting ready to break out here. But then look at the rest of what's going on in the Canadian market. You look at financials, you look at banks, you look at the gold sector, which has been under the flypaper channel since back in April of this year. It started to break down, and here we are once again trying to break out above the flypaper channel. There's income trusts. Then we're looking at healthcare, and of course the cannabis sector looks very much like this. Then you've got the global mining index still in the flypaper channel. Then we're looking at the materials sector, which broke down and then recovered on Friday, but we're still trading in or below the flypaper channel. So this is all bear market stuff. Then you've got Infotech, no change there. Then you're looking at the real estate sector, looking pretty similar to how it looks in the U.S. And then we've got telecom services trading up into the flypaper channel. And then you've got utilities looking pretty similar to how they look in the U.S. So this is not a bullish picture. We've had a lot of bear market rallies recently. We've got the Dow that's starting to poke its head out above the flypaper channel, but the rest of the market is not really following. And so the big question now is what happens next? Do the rest of the markets start to break out above the flypaper channel, or does the Dow start to come back down and the rest of the market go back down to retest or break the October lows? Let's finish off today's presentation looking at commodities, and crude oil just broke out on Friday above the flypaper channel, and gasoline broke out last week. Natural gas has moved up off the lows this week. It came up to the bottom of an open gap. We'll see if we can get through that on Monday, but still looking pretty bearish. Then the GLD, gold, still trading below the flypaper channel, so no change there. A lot more interest in silver than gold at the present time. We've got silver above the flypaper channel. Then looking at palladium, we're still down at the lows that we made back in June, so those lows are currently holding. And then looking at platinum, platinum is starting to break out above the flypaper channel, looking to see if it can take out the August highs. If it can do that, that would be very bullish for platinum. And then let's finish off. Putin said he was stopping wheat exports last week, and that got wheat a lot of headlines, but really no change in direction. We're still treading water here. And then lumber. Lumber was a big component of inflation fears back in 2021 and 2022. Nothing's been going on. We continue to make lower highs and lower lows. Looking to see what happens next. We're heading back down to retest the low from September, but certainly lumber cannot be pointed at as a major contributor to inflation in 2022. Okay, folks, that is all for this weekend's presentation. The Dow has been leading this market higher. That has always been a concern for me. I wish the rally had been broader. If it had been broader, I would have been more excited. If we started to make higher highs and break out above the September highs, I'd be really excited right now. But right now, I'm not very excited and concerned that the market has peaked and we should be heading lower from here. But again, as always, we'll just have to wait and see. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Next time you'll hear my voice is on Tuesday morning.